Thank you. Good morning. Wanted to see a show of hands. If you're from an agency, hands. All right. If you're from a brand, excellent. And then what else? Small business consulting. All right. So we got a good mix today. Great way to kick off the day. I'm going to try to put a little bit of a spin on this today to focus more on the advertising and marketing side. I've had a lot of clients, they've done programs in social media, but right now, after a lot of the tactics on Facebook and Twitter, they're finally taking a step back to look at, what's the business impact, what's the ROI. And so, a lot of the initial experiments have been around, Facebook ads, putting display ads with all the targeting parameters that Facebook affords you. But the question today is, how do we do? What's the next step? What more can we do with social media? And so I've had the privilege of stacking my own panel with people who can really talk about practical examples from many different industries. So we'll talk about B2C, we'll talk about B2B, technology marketing to CPG marketing. And it's really to give some examples that are not only practical but actionable. So those are the kinds of things, how do we move beyond just the like? A lot of these big companies, they've collected a whole bunch of likes, but it hasn't translated into much business impact. So today we're here to talk about, how to go beyond that. So as Kathy said, I've spent the last 16 years in the internet space, and the last couple, I've been Chief Digital Officer at a group of agencies within Omnicom focused on healthcare. But now I'm back on the outside and able to serve other industries. I'm going to first let our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get right into questions. So, Tim?
So I'm Tim Fogarty. I'm the head of strategy at M80. We're Group M's social media marketing agency.
And I'm Tom Gerace. I'm CEO of Skyward. Skyward's a company that provides a platform that lets brands, agencies, media companies produce and measure content, both for search and social.
I'm Matt Goddard. I'm the CEO of R2 Integrated, and we're a digital technology-focused and socially focused digital marketing company.
Sandra Lopez, and I work for new business marketing strategy at Intel.
I'm Samantha Ski, and I'm CRO for Recycle Bank, and we reward people for taking green actions.
Great. Well, I'm going to start with Sandra this morning. We're going to talk a little bit more about using social media beyond just advertising. First example would be, how do we listen in social channels and start to innovate our products around that? And the Intel example is going to be B2B/innovation. So, Sandra.
B2B and B2C. I think for those people in the room that are brand marketers and agencies working with brand marketers, we are at a critical point in time where marketing actually plays a critical role in driving not only marketing strategies, but also product innovation. So what we've done I worked with you actually, Augustine, about 5 years ago before the social media landscape really took off, is we created communities where we connected engineers within Intel and IT folks in terms of driving conversations. So a lot of it actually created content and on its own, of which we were able to publish and distribute to a wide network. So what we've learned from that is it's not only about driving the conversations, but also picking up on insights in terms of what do consumers really need, and really identifying that and feeding that back into the product innovation group. Also in terms of what messages will resonate, so it becomes a platform where you can test ideas fairly quickly, versus in the traditional brand marketer point of view is you would do focus groups, it would take a year to 2 years, so everything has accelerated exponentially. So from my perspective, working at Intel, both in B2B as well as driving B2C marketing strategies, whether it's the power middle and listening to them, listening to what consumers are having to say, we actually play a very critical role in business strategy, so taking it beyond marketing. So I advise all of you guys in brand marketing and working with agencies, understand the power that social media is bringing to your company and go beyond just marketing as a platform. Think about product innovation, think about competitive positioning, scenario-based planning, and I think we're just at the forefront.
Yeah, so a lot of this, we're talking about something well beyond Facebook, and some of those conversations don't really happen on Facebook even. So, another company that's doing really well in using social principles is IBM. If you look at, their internal blogs, there are thousands of those. And that's a way for their engineers to share ideas and really speed up the innovation process. So you mentioned speed. A lot of these big companies, if their product development department is separate from their marketing department, which is separate from their social media, couple of young kids doing, right? Those ideas will never flow quickly enough for them to actually innovate their product and keep up. So I think, some of these principles we're taking from social media and translating that into the enterprise side. So there's a marketing aspect to it. There's obviously an innovation aspect to it. And next I'm going to have Samantha talk a little bit about the nonprofit world and small business. I've been a small business owner for the better part of 16 years. And I have to get to the ROI. I can't afford the big marketing campaigns. So literally every day when I'm running some kind of campaign, I have to focus on, is it actually doing anything for me? So I would imagine it's the same for a nonprofit as well.
Yeah, we're actually not a nonprofit, but we are a cause and mission-driven company. So Recycle Bank is a for-profit company that's trying to drive consumer behavior change, and we do that through the use of a carrot versus a stick in terms of incentivizing people to take sort of small green steps every day, and then we track their behavior and track the impact of those changes in their activity and show them the degree to which they've helped the environment. But we do it by employing a fairly complicated, although simple to the end user, rewards system. And this is where I think the notion of catapulting users into ambassadors, advocates, and true fans really comes to life. Our incentive program integrates monetary value with social value and sort of community or good points in the, we often are tempted to riff on like what doing good means for you in your future life, or sort of in your sort of points against going to a very bad place someday. So so I won't go there. Just did. But the monetary value, the social value, and the sort of good for the community value are intermingled, and we deliver those types of rewards back to each user based on the degree to which they're advancing this initiative of behaving in a green fashion. So that kind of model is not terribly expensive because the currency of points has more value than the actual cost of the rewards, which is really important. If you get in the practice of just paying people to do stuff, that's really expensive and difficult to scale. If you get in the practice of giving them chits that have to them a perceived value of more than the monetary value, that's very scalable. And that also sort of enables us to drive advocacy in that we can reward people for propagation and for group activities. So it's more complex than I can address in this short period of time, but we've been able to use some of these social dynamics and kind of the toolkits available to marketers to sort of drive exponential engagement in a cause, and to do so on a very small budget.
And can you talk about the two examples, like the one big company using it and like a one smaller?
Sure. So for SMBs, who have maybe 10 grand in their marketing budget, what we do is sort of work with them to address a very specific action they're trying to engender. So it might be just sign up to have your energy calculated on a regular basis, your energy usage in the home. That might be something that they are gonna foster among their community, and we'll focus very specifically on that action, and then give people points for making a commitment and then propagating. And that has, for a small business, we work with a range from, the Nature Conservancy to Charity Water, the ability to really focus on one small action and then to provide rewards for for distributing that action has been very productive and has yielded maybe in the tens of thousands of per month marketing value for some of the small businesses we work with. On the larger side, we work with Unilever, big corporates side, we work with Unilever, and Unilever was endeavoring to make a point about consumer usage of the product itself being a key to environmental responsibilities. So Turn Off the Tap is a campaign that we launched with Suave, and the idea there was that you can just use this product in a more sustainable fashion, and we're going to give you points for being more sustainable and thoughtful about your usage. And that was because I think it had a topical element, a cause piece, which enables social status, and then a monetary value in the points, propelled to tens of millions of people, actually. So, the budget is still there as the core investment and what you're able to do from a development standpoint. But the propagation, if titrated correctly, can be really valuable.
Yeah, so that's a great example of where it's the people carrying the message forward. It's not Unilever trying to do advertising via these social channels. So there's a concept of social amplification, and it's best when it's done by the people themselves. And the other key point I always emphasize to my clients is that social media is not media. They still treat it, or they ask for reach and frequency. Okay, how many billions of impressions can we buy on Facebook? But really, in asking that, they fail to realize the true value of social media. And that was a great example where, if we can incentivize the people to be the ones helping us carry that forward, all the more powerful. And there's plenty of Forrester research that says that people trust their peers most, and they trust ads the least. And so if it's coming from their friend, they're probably going to act upon it, right? So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Matt to talk a little bit about communities and really, creating a platform for the conversation amongst, like if it's consumer peer-to-peer, or in some cases, Matt and I have worked on pharma examples where, physicians want to be talking to other physicians, but actually pharma, companies don't want them to talk because then the truth comes out. But, I think that's the trend. We really have to create or enable these venues or platforms where, peers can talk.
Yeah, so I would emphasize that when social media or social network theory first came out, it was a channel. It was a new place to do marketing. But what we're realizing is that social is more of a behavior. It's a core behavior, and the core of it is risk reduction. It's a risk reduction behavior, and what I mean by that is people reach out to like-minded friends, family, or peers to make better decisions, both in life and in business. So as you're thinking about your community building activities and you're thinking about, how do we do this, you have to look at what is the risk associated with the product that I sell? What is the decision-making behavior associated with the product that I sell? Is it B2C? Is it B2B? Is it a considered product? It is a non-considered product. Is it my deodorant? Or is it a car? Because all of these things affect the risk reduction. Now, when it comes to patient and doctors, a patient, if you're sick, that's one of the greatest risks that you can have. And there are a lot of social networks that are evolving. There's Patients Like Me, which allow patients to talk to patients. There's Health Tap, which allows doctors in an individual instance to answer a patient's question. And then there's some new doctor social networks that are evolving. But in the middle of all that is the privacy factor. So doctors are not comfortable in the open web answering a specific question for a specific patient because that's health advice, and they could get into trouble. So you're seeing patients talk to patients, you're seeing doctors talk to doctors, but you're not really seeing any activity in the open web because of the privacy factor. Now, the privacy factor is starting to find its way into other products as well, and it'll be interesting to see what the feds do and how it affects us. But I would encourage everyone to think of community building and think of your activities. Focus on, how does the person purchase my product? Is there a risk associated with buying it? How are they going to use their peers in order to make that purchasing decision? And centralize that behavior, social as a behavior, and use it to activate all of your channels, not just the social channel.
And I can echo that in terms of, especially if it's a more expensive product, people want to get a lot of advice, and a lot of times they're currently going online for reviews. But, we have plenty of reviews for things like digital cameras and other products, but we really don't have the kind of reviews or informed reviews for physicians or other, it's just getting started right now. But one of the main points there is that, these actions don't take place on Facebook or Twitter. So again, going back to, say, advertising and marketing clients, if the first question out of their mouths is, what do we do on Facebook and what do we do on Twitter, they still got a long way to go. Basically, that may not even be the right question. So, when we deal with the pharma clients, when they're marketing an oncology drug, there's absolutely no reason they should be on Facebook. But, if they're marketing a product like Gardasil, then, all their fans, all their customers are already on Facebook. So in those instances, that becomes the right question. But, when we talk about targeting and the kind of privacy, a lot of advertisers are still using Facebook as, this holy grail of, we've got so many additional parameters to use to target individuals. I think that's going to run up against individuals' need for privacy, right? Because at some point they're going to say enough is enough. I don't want you to get more information about me or buy and sell my data without me knowing about it in order to target me with more ads. And so another approach that we've used is really focusing on creation of content. So instead of thinking about targeting ads or pushing more ads at people, no matter how targeted it is, what is it that's going to actually generate the conversation? And a lot of that has to focus on content. It's content, like Jeff was saying earlier, content enables the conversation. When you create the content, people have something to talk about. So, Tom's company, Skyward, is a platform for doing that, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the B2B examples where, there just has been not enough content for people to talk about.
Yeah. Augustine, it's funny. When I think of how most brands approach social, I think of how young teenagers approach their first high school dance. They're socially awkward, and they really don't know how to engage in conversation with one another. You can imagine what most brands do. They walk into a room, they don't listen to the other folks in the room. They walk up and they just start talking about themselves constantly. And they don't really pay attention to what the other folks want to discuss. And it creates this experience where people, even if they've joined a Facebook group or they've begun to follow a brand on Twitter, they don't find the experience engaging or in any way rewarding. One of the things that can be a great social lubricant for a brand is to understand a lot about what their customers and prospects are looking for, and to give them the information they actually want. That is not necessarily product information, but information that really helps them in their lives. We've seen Pampers do this. Pampers doesn't create a lot of content about diapers. But what they learned was that moms-to-be and new moms need to know about fertility and breastfeeding. They think about what to name their babies. They want to know about early childhood development and the stages of pregnancy. And by creating content that coaches pregnant women and moms through the experience, they can really engage with them. And moms end up sharing that experience and engaging with the brand and sharing that experience with their friends. IBM has just begun to do this. We've had a lot of success. IBM, of course, wants to reach technology investors, technology professionals. We've helped IBM create a site called the Midsize Insider. And if you visit midsizeinsider.com, what you'll see is a lot of content about technology that helps CIOs and CTOs and mid-sized businesses deal with the challenges they've got every day. It's a news site. And most of the content, vast majority of the content, is not about IBM. It's about security. It's about cloud computing. It's about malware. It's about transactional processing. It's all the stuff these folks want to know. But instead of seeding the entire conversation to media sites and then buying brand advertising around it, IBM is creating this content with domain experts. We're publishing it in a way, we had the site, we managed to get the site admitted to Google News, and so now that content appears in news searches, right adjacent PC Week and Ad Week and all of the places you might otherwise get the content. And when conversation happens, the people that are talking with and sharing this IBM content are bringing people back into the IBM space, where IBM can subtly introduce their brand and the value they're creating to the potential consumer. And I think that kind of social lubricant really connects the brands with their audience in a far better way than just talking about the brand.
Yep. it's real value there. It's not about direct selling. It's not about beating your chest and talking about yourself, which most brands still do. And it's kind of understandable that they still do that because they've come off of decades of TV ads, which is basically them talking about themselves, how great they are. But now it's really a new mindset. It really has to be thought of as a conversation. And so I had a similar analogy, which is if you have a PR agency do your social media for you, it's kind of like sending someone else on a date for you, right? So you have to be the one having that conversation. You have to be the one going on that date. And it really is about the change of mindset. And a lot of clients, it's part of an educational curve, and Tim's been doing that. We've been doing that together for some clients. How do we change their mindset to think of social media as not just another place to go push your ads, but really to earn your way into a conversation? First driven by content, but how do we talk about the change of mindset and how do we bring clients along that curve?
Well, so it's an everyday conversation, right? It's not something where all of a sudden we've won the argument, and that's the thing where we've spent our entire careers, probably all of us in this room, trying to tell people about things and to change that and to all of a sudden say, okay, well, it's a conversation now. Yeah, okay, we'll get there, and it's something we need to work towards, and it's admirable. But the other part of that too is that where we think about these major channels and where the first question is, okay, so what do we do for Facebook? A lot of that isn't conversation, and a lot of that really is pretty ad-oriented experiences because people don't necessarily, and to Kathy's point earlier, want to talk to a toothpaste brand every day. And so I think the examples we've brought up here are either great examples of things that matter to people, whether it's professionally or personally. You think about Intel, you think about the environment, right? These are things that people care about, so they go to it. I think the Wharton School, like 5 years ago, put out an amazing piece of research talking about why people share, and it comes down to just mattering. And so, sadly, my entire job is to just tell brands to matter more often, like make people care about you, and that's pretty much it. That's the whole thing, right? So when you get to that conversation, it's the first question I'll typically ask is, why would I ever talk about you? And make it immediately very personal, because we're semi-rational actors, right? I'm not necessarily going to sit on my laptop all day and talk about toothpaste or anything else, and that's okay. And so finding the right things to talk about, I think content planning is just every day something we have to do and have to rethink every day too, and that's a difficult part. And I imagine your editorial process is just terrifyingly high speed.
It is, yeah.
And we're also moving away from the concept of campaign-based, right? So if you think about TV or print or any kind of traditional advertising, it's let's plan this campaign, let's run it, and then it's over. And so, even though those campaigns could probably drive a lot of traffic to a website or to your brand, it's very short-lived. And we've seen many of the analytics where once you turn off the supporting media, it goes right back down to nothing. So with social media, we have a unique opportunity to build something that continues to increase in value over time. And so some of that's going to be the content that you accumulate. So all those sites, all the content on the IBM site, will continue to grow in value. And as people find that through search, then there's going to be something to talk about. So it's really a hard road for a lot of these brands who are coming off of just years or decades of pushing their message out through these one-way media. It's really trying to get acclimated to two-way, and also how do you have that conversation? And it's not just one conversation, right? It's continuous. And we talk about how do we plan for that? Because most agencies, they get allocated a budget. It's used for this quarter or this year at most, and it's over. So again, there's a lot of changes that have to happen. A lot of it has to do with the perspective. So I'm going to have one more question with the panel, but if the audience wants to start preparing their questions, we'll take those in a minute. So I guess there's one more pharma analogy. People don't friend Lipitor on Facebook. It's because they don't, they friend their friends on Facebook, and they're there to talk. So I mean, those are the kinds of examples we've accumulated over the years, and I think right now a lot of the brand marketers are just starting this transition. You know, they've all run their experiments online and on various social networks. I mean, literally all of today, we haven't, you know, mentioned Twitter. We haven't mentioned Pinterest or even Groupon. I mean, all those are, to me, kind of, well, I just mentioned them, but now I have. I covered every one of those. But, you know, those are the shiny objects that may drive a temporary lift in sales. But, you know, think about whether they're actually sustainable and whether they have any kind of lasting value. So, you know, for the brand marketers out there, I think social is still a very much untapped opportunity. So any last comments or thoughts?
I just want to get on, like, give you a mad high five for the making it matter bit, because I think that's what we try to do all the time. It's exhausting for marketers, but I think it's a shift in the way that we contemplate communication between brands and their customers. The idea that relevance is sort of a perpetual pursuit, and what's relevant today won't be relevant tomorrow. What's relevant to new moms is very different than what's relevant to moms of 3 who are trying to get back into the workplace. So I think we have to be much more psychologically adept and sort of contemplate the id, ego, and superego of each of our consumers. Like, what do they want for themselves? How do they want to be perceived? And sort of and weave that into our planning with social, which is not. I don't think it's an easy task at all, by the way, or that anyone's totally figured it out.
Yeah.
Say the terror of a brand manager realizing that he or she matters in the wrong way to their consumers or their fan base is a terrifying and amazing thing to watch.
The unraveling.
Not that I'm ever rooting for it, don't get me wrong, but just to see someone realize that, oh, well, they just want to talk about us giving them free stuff. Yep. And, well, yeah, that happens
we're cheap, or you can use us to, like, blow shit up.
Yeah.
That's not what they're
I would talk about, to me, the big elephant in the room in social is what I call the scale versus relevancy problem. Now, agencies in the past have done everything on scale, and scale means you say it once, you blast it out to 10 million people, 100 million people. But in social, when you get into these uber relevant conversations, it's a one-to-one experience. Brands cannot manage this conversation layer at scale. It would take thousands and thousands of people monitoring and listening to the web every single day and having these one-to-one conversations in order for them to manage it at scale. So we've got this awful problem. We need to do things at scale. If I'm Coke or, you know, I need to reach millions and millions and millions of people, but I can't do the uber relevant one-to-one communication.
I think the question is, how do you scale intimacy, to your point? Like, how do you scale?
You can't. You can't. So,
like,
so you
I
can't
deeply
manage it.
love you all.
In New York, though.
Yeah, you can't scale it. So, you know, we've talked about having brand advocates. We've talked about having, you know, IT and the engineers talking to each other. You know, we've talked about having, you know, at the retail level with some of our retail clients, individual store managers become the community manager for the local community and supplementing, you know, that with the national reach. But that's the big elephant in the room, and it's not going away. And I just don't know how brands are gonna deal with that.
But that brings up a great point. It's really two different things, right? You know, you don't think of social as something you do at scale. It's got to be those conversations. It's apples to oranges to TV. So yes, you should still do your TV, but you should also do social that's complementary. And like Jeff was saying earlier, social is additive, right? You need to weave that in and provide that two-way feedback loop.
Yep. But I think the way you get intimacy is to inspire the conversation, but to allow people to have the conversation in your space. Very few of us want to talk to random strangers all of the time. But if we've got a shared interest, if we've got a TV show we love, or if we've got a film we love, or if we've got a book group, we want to talk with the people we know a lot about it. And I think the Coke example is a good one. If you go to Coke's Facebook experience, you'll find they've assembled some 30 million people on Facebook that have liked the brand. If you look at the content, I looked a couple of weeks ago, their consumers were out publishing them by a rate of about 4 to 1. And 75% of the consumers that were publishing in the Coke space were detractors. They were talking about liking Pepsi better, or having a Coca-Cola email scam that got them, or trying to reach Coke about a defective product. I mean, challenging stuff for a brand to have assembled, and yet Coke wants to assemble these folks, and they want 30 million people together, but they haven't figured out what to talk to them about. But come summer, Coke is about to be, for I think the 80th year running, the sponsor of the Olympics. And they could be publishing constant content about the athletes who are training for the games and about the different sports that are lining up and about how you train for the summer games.
Just letting people talk about that.
And exactly, and if they're talking about it in the Coke space, if my friends start to talk about these athletes that they love or the sports that they follow or they played in, I'm pretty likely to respond to my friends, and I'm going to get into this dialogue, and I'm going to talk about the Olympics, and it's going to be wrapped in the Coke brand, and I'm going to have that great feeling that Coke wants to give me, identified with their brand. But they've got to go and create the experience that's going to bring me together with people that share the same interests I've got.
Perfect example.
I was going to make a comment. As a brand marketer, I think one of the things that we've been challenged with is the fact that we've lost control, right? So consumers actually have the control. And I think what we should do, and something that Intel we've been struggling with over the past couple years, is how do we embrace consumers? And consumers are your brands. They're telling you what they want from a product standpoint. They're guiding you from a messaging standpoint. I think, to your point, Tom, too, in terms of if they're talking about Pepsi versus Coke, then it's all about context. Like, what do they really care about? And I think as brand marketers, we have to really start to embrace the power of consumers and not get disheveled with regards to conversations that are negative. That's actually good, right? It gives you insights. We work with the power middle bloggers, and we have conversations with them about our technology, and they'll tell us that technology is not relevant for my audience. Well, that's insightful, so I'll go back and we'll go tell that to the engineers. So from my perspective, I think this is a fascinating world because never before do we have that direct access to consumers, and we just need to leverage that moving forward.
That's great. And with that, let's turn it over to the audience for any kind of questions.
Oh, right here, Rob. Thanks.
Hi, I have a question for Samantha. If you could just talk more about the points in your social space and how that really relates to monetizing your social initiatives and increasing your ROI.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, I'm going to try so hard to be brief. This is not my strength. So points, points work well if there's like a whole conference series on points, as I'm sure you know if you're interested in them. But if they have perceived value, like airline points, they are a wonderful mechanism to drive the kinds of behaviors and customer loyalty that most brands are coveting. We have used points to reward people, to acknowledge first what our members are doing in the environmental space, and secondly to reward them. So we try to be intent agnostic in terms of what our members are motivated by. So we have some people who just love getting deals, and they'll recycle all day long and twice on Sunday just because they want to buy more shit, which is weird. The points turn into rewards. It's a currency that allows you to, what's very cool about it from a consumer marketing standpoint is you can measure your customer's participation every day, every week, every month. You can see how it goes up and down based on how many points they have, and they can do that too. So you have this wonderful bridge between business and consumer where we're pursuing the same thing. We want more activity, they want more points. The points, then they can go to a marketplace that we house and use their points to purchase rewards. So the rewards are daily deals. It's like $1 off or something cool from Coca-Cola. So it's not a small undertaking to produce a real rewards program, but if you can get to a place where your points have more value than the rewards, like if someone pursues 1,000 points to get $2 off of an Aveeno product, that's like mad scalable, super efficient for us as marketers.
And there's other ways of conveying value without points per se. So I take the Foursquare badge system. So you're rewarding someone for checking in, and they get the badge of mayor. It doesn't cost Foursquare anything, but it's a perceived value to that person. And furthermore, there's other things that kind of reward certain activities. So the giant swarm, at Central Park. So I think one day was at Sheep's Meadow. There's more than 500 people there checking in or something like that. So there's other ways of creating that value that doesn't necessarily rely on
points. We use
points.
social, we use badging, and you're ascending a green trajectory in your eco IQ, which is just for some 30% of our audience just wants to get smarter about green and to showcase on their social platforms their increasing intelligence and eco.
And that's something they want to share with their friends. Exactly. It's not you making them share it. They want to share that, right? Because they're proud of that. That's great. Thank you.
So, okay, I have a question. Okay, I hope this is like a Mensa question. So we were talking, I think, we talked about this a couple times, you guys did, about making, trying to find the meaning in your brand. So if I'm a brand, what's the difference between branding and finding kind of the meaning for your brand? Where do they diverge, and where are they the same thing?
I mean, we've already transitioned to this world. I mean, in the past, it was what the brand said they were. Now it's what the people say you are.
Right. I would say where you've got branding as the signifier for the product, you also have the product experience, and that becomes a very separate line of communication and discussion that, to my mind, is generally much more important. I mean, the line back to the engineers is so much better than me knowing which notes are in the Intel Inside bung, 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 bung.
I think it's in a lot of ways tied to what gives a brand meaning to the people that work with it every day. We talk about mission and vision and values in our companies a lot, and we do that because we know that it creates really healthy companies where people care about what they're doing and care about where they work. But often we don't share that outwardly. We don't share that with the folks that are buying our products. I mean, Pampers, when I went down and met with them for the first time, we did this brand voice training, and I was blown away by the fact that they talked about what their mission is to help raise healthy babies. And I thought, okay, that's a great thing to put up on the wall. But then when we talked about it, they got into I asked what does that mean to them. They got into this idea that for example, the preemie market was not a profitable market, not a large enough market for P&G to address. But they kept getting letter after letter after letter from moms and dads of preemie babies who weren't getting any sleep. And they didn't have a diaper that would fit. And this was a real problem. And they were exhausted, and they were already struggling with a child that needed more love and attention in the early days. And they were nervous about that and stressed about that. And Pampers wanted to help them raise healthy babies that happened to be born premature. And so they went into a market and they developed a product that was for preemie babies, knowing that they would earn customers for lives. Of course, there's a benefit to the brand, but their main goal was to create healthy babies. And I thought that's an incredible story that I'd never heard before about the brand. And it really captures this essence of what they're out there doing and carries it forward. And I think gave the people in the room a sense for the mission, but could give their customers a sense for why the brand matters too.
This is where the consumer created a category for Pampers, a new market for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but interestingly, I assume it's still not something they really make money on. But it's more, it has a lot more to do with kind of the halo effect and the mission of the brand, right?
Exactly.
And it allows you to talk about sleep, and it allows you, which is an emotional,
Health, yeah.
super deep thing for parents.
Yeah.
And speaking as one who's getting none, and it's also it also allows you to speak about the health issues related to diaper technology, which diapers are a biggie for us because of sustainability, and using fewer diapers is better for the environment, and diapers remaining dry is great for baby's skin health. So
I think the value of the brand at certain moments in time is changing. Because, in the next 5 years, whether we want to believe it or not, we're going to enter a world where all information about every product is known. It's readily available. If I hire a salesperson to come help me sell my product, that person, after a month of training, is going to know a lot less about it than the market does. So my brand is really it's gonna be different things at different moments in time, depending on the search behavior of the person, depending on their buying process, depending on their research process, depending on whether it's a considered product, depending on whether it's a non-considered product. I might get advice from a peer, I might get advice from an expert before I even go to the brand. So I just think the whole thing is changing, and the idea of having a core brand, I don't know if that's going to resonate as much in the future. I think when all information is known, when all information about a product is available and out there for all to see, that is the brand.
Can I ask a question on that before we get too far past it? What's the role of misinformation or disinformation in that model?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because we've actually run some mathematical models which show when a sample size hits a certain number, the information becomes true. And the reason is because most people are good people and most people are not going to purposely misinform. So I think it's like 30 people. If 30 people mention something on a website, the information is usually true. So the fact that you have misinformation only occurs in areas where you have small sample size, which also speaks to brands. You know, if you want to try to control certain aspects of the conversation, that's actually a mistake, because then the misinformation can find its way into a small sample size and affect the the perception of the product. But if you have very large sample sizes, the information is usually true.
And I think we can see that in what we look at every day in Amazon reviews. So I think consumers are getting more and more savvy now. If there are just 3 reviews about that product, it could be easily gamed by the brand or their PR agency, right? But if there's 5,000 reviews of that product, it's much, much harder to game. So like you said, that's a great data point. 30 is kind of the magic number. So the larger the sample size, the less likely it is to be gamed. And then one other point about brand.
I have to caveat that a little bit, that there's some information, like, for example, diapers are bad for the environment when washing cloth diapers actually uses far more energy. That there's some information that consumers simply don't have. And so I think that's where the 30, we had 50,000 people who thought on our site that disposable diapers were worse for the environment, and they were simply uninformed. There was a need for additional information.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be situations where there's things out there, but that seems different to me. That seems like a universal issue across the country or globally, as opposed to is this product as good as they say it is online?
Okay, we got one more question.
So is social media all about the content creation, and are all brands in the position to be content creators now?
Probably not immediately. I mean, they have a whole education curve to come up, and I can say some brands are much further along than others. We've seen some great examples today of brands that are, or companies that are, but a lot of the marketers, again, because they're coming off of TV advertising, which is inherently one way, this is all new to them. So that's why I say, there's still huge opportunity ahead for them to use this properly, to use social media properly.
Well, I can talk from Intel perspective. We've changed our organization, and we call ourselves publishers. And so what's been really difficult is how do you map out editorial calendars that are continuous, because the conversations are not one point in time, and provide content that's developed either within Intel or working with our agency partners, or quite frankly, the best content comes from our consumers and bloggers that are very passionate about technology. And so how do we just leverage that and amplify that? But marketing is changing, and when I talk to my fellow marketers inside of Intel and outside of Intel, is we cannot become obsolete. So we got to figure out, how do we leverage these channels? How do we become publishers and drive content that's relevant to the consumer? So it's not, again, pushing content out like Coca-Cola is doing today, but how do you figure out those compelling stories so then consumers can amplify and tell your story, and drive brand awareness or engagement for your brand?
I think that's a really important point. A lot of the time, I mean, yes, I think we will see a time when brands are all or almost all brands are publishers, because I think a lot of them are slowly catching on to what Sandra just described. But I think one of the key lessons is that very often it won't be the brand that is itself, the employees of the brand that are creating that content. If you've ever tried to have your senior team blog for your company, you know how tough it is to get content created by folks that have other jobs in the company. But there are these passionate domain experts, the influencers in your specific area, and if you bring them in to share content under your brand, they love it because you help bring them an audience. You help amplify their voice, and they're really happy to help create the message for you.
Perfect. So the way I'll wrap this up is to say social media gives brands the opportunity to change from storytellers to publishers. So with that, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.